All right, I read this little article. I thought it was great. It was, the title of it is, "And After That." A boat docked in a tiny Mexican village. An American tourist complimented the Mexican fisherman for the quality of his fish and asked how long it took him to catch them. "Not very long," answered the Mexican. "But then, why didn't you stay out longer and catch more?" asked the American. The Mexican explained that his small catch was sufficient to meet his needs and those of his family. The American asked, "But what do you do with the rest of your time?" "I sleep late, fish a little, play with my children, and take siestas with my wife. In the evenings, I go into the village to see my friends, play the guitar, sing a few songs. I have a full life." The American interrupted, "I have an MBA from Harvard, and I can help you. You should start by fishing longer every day. You can then sell the extra fish you catch. With the extra revenue, you can buy a bigger boat." "And after that?" asked the Mexican. "With the extra money the larger boat will bring, you can buy a second one and a third one and so on until you have an entire fleet of trawlers. Instead of selling your fish to a middleman, you can negotiate directly with the processing plants and maybe even open your own plant. You can leave this little village and move to Mexico City, Los Angeles, or even New York. From there, you can direct your huge new enterprise." "How long will that take?" asked the Mexican. 20, perhaps 25 years, replied the American. "And after that?" "Afterwards, well, my friend, that's when it really gets interesting," answered the American, laughing. When your business gets really big, you can start selling stocks and make millions." "Millions, really? And after that?" asked the Mexican. "After that, you'll be able to retire. Live in a little village near the coast, sleep late, play with your children, catch a few fish, take a siesta with your wife, and spend your evenings doing what you like and enjoying your friends." Okay? And so sometimes we got to say, okay, and after that, what? I'm doing all of this, and after that, then what? Why am I doing this? And I read that and I thought, that's great. This guy goes through all of that stress to get to where he already is. And so I thought we would look at it and we'll ask ourselves that question: slave to what? What is it that you're a slave to? And we've been going through the book of 2 Peter. We went through the book of 1 Peter. And before that, we had the life of Peter. And we find this verse, verse 19, chapter 2, in the book of 2 Peter. And this is what it says: "Promising them freedom, while they themselves are slaves to corruption. For by what a man is overcome, by this he is enslaved." Okay? And so I thought about that, starting the thing on promising freedom. And how many of you remember the 60s, last century? Okay? The 60s and the 70s, and it was the time for freedom. There was free love, which turned out costing a whole lot more than what people thought it was going to cost. That didn't work out so well, so forget the free love. And then you were going to free your mind. Timothy Leary came along with lysergic diethyl acid. You know it as LSD. But then people found out one thing. It didn't really free your mind. You were actually slave to that, because guess what? It never left your body, and you could have an hallucination 20 years later and not even know it. It was coming. Just boom, it just stayed in your body. And so that freeing your mind didn't work so well. And then there was financial freedom. Boy, this is how to become financially free, like that. And you set yourself and you worked and you slaved, and then you found out that you had more stuff and you really weren't free at all, because now you had to protect it, because you had all this stuff and you didn't really have freedom financially either. And I got to thinking about, freedom. So what is freedom anyway? We think freedom is, I can do what I want to. It's kind of like when Frankie goes to be with her parents. I could stay up until 1 o'clock in the morning. Until I get that phone call at 7 in the morning, and then all of a sudden that freedom wasn't so great. And so this freedom that we think we have. But what is he talking about here? Promising them freedom. Who and what is he talking about? Well, you have to go clear back to the beginning of the chapter, actually. And what he's talking about is false teachers who get up and say, let me tell you, there's freedom in Jesus. You can do anything you want to. Because now you're a Christian, you're not bound by the Old Testament law anymore, so you can just go out and do anything. Really? And that's what he's talking about. This is really their characteristics. If you happen to look back up to verses 13 and 14, you find this. Suffering wrong as the wages of doing wrong, they counted a pleasure. There's one of the freedoms that they said you have. To revel, there's the second one, in the daytime. They are stains and blemishes. Reveling, there it is again. In their deceptions, there's another one. As they carouse, there's another one. Having eyes full of adultery, there's another one. And never cease from sin, there's another one. Enticing unstable souls, having a heart trained in greed, there's another one. Accursed children. And so what he says, these guys get up and say, we're going to give you freedom. And here's the way that they do it. They would just revel in the daytime. And they would carouse. And they would carry on. After all, we're not constrained by the law anymore. The Old Testament law doesn't apply to, especially the Jewish Christians. Didn't apply to the Gentiles anyway. But we can do anything we want. And he says, let me just tell you, what they do is they have those certain characteristics. And those characteristics are pleasure, reveling, carousing, adultery, and greed. Those are the motivations. He said those are still there. So, well, that doesn't happen today. Well, actually it does. There are people who get up and say, if you give to God, God will give you tenfold back. What's that basis off of? Or 100-fold, depending on which one you hear. It's greed, whether we want to admit it or not. We want to be wealthy. So there's people who get up and they preach that God's whole goal is to make you wealthy. Or God's whole goal is to make you happy. There's the pleasure type thing. See? And it's like, this is what they get up and they preach. And why? Because it appeals to us. How many of us want to be happy in life? Everybody but Soren Kierkegaard. You wouldn't even know who that guy is. He was a philosopher, Danish philosopher, who said, if you're not miserable, you're not a good Christian. That was the sum total of what he said, but that was just his whole thing, that you should be out there suffering and everything should be terrible for you. But here, what happens is we take a very normal thing and then we turn it into something else. Now, many of you have heard of the term legalism. That very legalistic church. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't play cards, you can't dance. I go with that second one, you can't dance, because I can't dance. But, they say you can't do this, you can't do that, and everything extremely legalistic. So what's the opposite of that? It's a thing called antinomianism, meaning there is no law. Okay? Now we heard about the legalism, and my parents made me go to church when I was a kid, so I'm not going now. And all they preached on was you can't do this, you can't do that. My parents made me take a shower when I was a kid. And I've decided to quit taking them now because, after all, that's not fair if my parents made me. No, I still take showers. Just because your parents made you do something is not necessarily bad. My parents made me eat vegetables. I still should be doing that. But here he says, these guys, they get up and they're what they call the Antinomianism group. And that is, you should just be able to do anything you want to do. But whether it's the greed, whether it's the adultery, whether it's any of those things. And he says at the bottom, they're accursed children. And so what they have done is found actually in 1 Peter 2:16. He says, act as free men, only do not use your freedom as a covering for evil, but use it as a bond slave of God. So he says, hey, yeah, you're free in Jesus Christ, but don't use that as a covering for evil. I'm a Christian, I can do anything I want to. Don't do that. Don't use it as, well, I'm a Christian, therefore I can have the greed, I can have the adultery, God's not going to hold me accountable for that. That's the whole viewpoint. And he says, don't use that freedom as a covering for your evil. Instead, use it the other way. Now, I go back to what I asked you earlier. What is it that overcomes and enslaves you? What are you enslaved to? Okay, Jessie says her yard. Man, sometimes that yard can own your life, can't it?
And I enjoy it.
But have you ever thought of that? You fertilize the grass so it grows faster. And because it grows faster, now you have to mow it. And when you mow it, then you have to water it more often and it just becomes a pretty vicious cycle, doesn't it? You know, all kinds of things can own our lives. Money can own our lives. We want money. How many of you would like to have $1 million? Okay, the rest of you don't. That's good. Okay, we'd like to have $1 million, and then money becomes important. Listen, I would like most people. Money's not the only thing, but it's way ahead of whatever's in second place. Okay? Money is important. We got to have it. But at what point does it take over your life to where you'll take on extra work, you'll do all kinds of extra stuff because you've got to have more money? At what point do you become rich? Are you rich now? You see? But money can take over our lives. Work can take over our lives. There are people who work 50, 60, 70 hours a week, 80 hours a week, because they love to work. And they just want to work more and more and more. And when it comes to retirement, what are you going to do? Going to go find another job. You know? And some people, they talk about their work. You meet them within 2 minutes, what they're talking about is their job. It controls their life. For some people, it's pleasure. They don't want to work. They're on the opposite end of this string. Only work if you have to. But pleasure. I want to have all the pleasure. I was talking to a young man who said, well, my whole goal in life is to have fun as I go through life. He didn't want to work. Didn't want to do things. He wanted pleasure to be the ultimate. What do I enjoy? You know, it's a pleasure. For some people, it's sex. Okay? Did you hear that? Okay, it's sex. Okay? I was reading one time on about Charlie Manson. Do you know that he would have sex 8 times a day? You know, it's one of the reasons he had the communion. That was a driving factor in his life. And there are some people that's what it is. I mean, you know, that's just what drives them. Then there are other people that what the driving thing in their life is their kids. You know, do everything for your kids. Then they move. And they don't have anything to do with you. Man, and now what do you live for? You know what drives you? What is it that you live for? Some people, it's television. When you walk in the door, you turn the TV on? Well, yeah. Okay, why? Got to have that TV on. I knew one person that they would not miss a certain show at night. Had to get home because if they had to see the show. It absolutely drove their life because, if they didn't watch that show, you know what would happen? Me neither. But they had to watch it. There are all kinds of things that drive. Some people has a computer. Late at night, pounding away on the computer. Got to be on that computer because it owns their life. For some people, it's the cell phone. You leave the cell phone at home, what do? You got to go back and get that cell phone. Got to have it with us, man, I think. And then, sure hope this thing's waterproof. I've got it in the shower here with me. Man, we gotta text all the time because I am breathing right now. How about you? Me too. That's good. Let's see our friends. Are you breathing too? And gotta have that cell phone and everything, and it consumes our lives. Let me ask you. So what drives you? What are you a slave to? Now, most of you would say, I'm not a slave to anything, right? You know what you're thinking out there? I'm not a slave to anything. Jesus stood up, John 8 says, and you shall know the truth, and the truth. And they said, we are Abraham's descendants. We have never yet been enslaved to anyone. How is it you say you will become free? You see, those are the answers we give. I'm not a slave to any of that. Yes, I go to work. Yes, I have that, but I'm not a slave to any of those things. And Jesus answered this. When they said this to him, this is what Jesus answered. Jesus answered and said, truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who commits sin is the slave to sin. Hey, maybe you're enslaved and you didn't know it. Maybe all of us were enslaved and we didn't know it. No. It says if we've sinned, we're a slave to sin. Sin owns us. Now all of us have our favorite sins. Those are the ones we want to do. And we do them. And then we point out everybody else's sins so that we don't feel so bad about our sins. But it says here, we're a slave to sin. Wow. That means I can't get away from it. What's Romans 6:23 say? Anybody know? The wages of sin is death. But the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. Okay? What's the verse before it say? Glad you asked, Jerry. It is Romans 6:22. And it says this, but now, having been freed from sin and enslaved to God, you derive your benefit, resulting in sanctification and the outcome, eternal life. And so what he says is, when you became free, what you should have done is become enslaved to God. That is what should drive us in our lives, day in and day out. What I'm enslaved to, what you should be enslaved to when we become a Christian, when I become free, and he's got this great whole section in Romans there, that if you are free from God, you're a slave to sin. If you've been freed from sin, you're a slave to God. It is one of those oxymoron type things, the dilemmas of life. And he tells us that what we should do is become a slave to God. God is the one who should be driving our lives. In your job, the job shouldn't be driving your life. God should be driving your life in that job. You should be saying, God, how can I do this job best? Lord, how do I keep my yard the best to be a witness for you? This is that God drives my life in everything that I do. You know that verse that says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness and all these things of the attitude. That's the whole idea. That we would seek him first and say, you know what? God, I want you to drive my life. In my job, in my house, in my finances, in every part of my life, in my sex life, in my child's life, in my parental life, in everything I do, God, I want to be your slave. Drive me that way. It's not that things own me. It's that God owns me, and I have things, and I have a very loose grasp on them. That's difficult to do. We'll go back to Jesse's house. There was a guy who lived here named Ray Monia. And Ray said he was watching TV one time when they had fires in California. I haven't had any recently, but back when they did. Okay? And so he was watching, and it was down, and this guy's house burned down. He was 81 years old. And they interviewed him and said, so what do you think now that your house is burned down? And he stood back and said, isn't God good? Can you imagine? He's letting me start over at 81. You see, the house didn't own him. He owned the house. And God was the one driving his life. And that's what we need to get to in our lives. So when I ask you, what are you enslaved to? What is driving your life? If you didn't answer the Lord, then we missed the point. If someone would ask me that question, I don't know that I would have answered that. That, God is the one driving my life in what I do. It's so easy to let something else be the driving force in what I do. And too difficult to say, Lord, you be the driver in each one of these things. I want to be your slave. I will go where you want me to go. I will do what you want me to do. I will be what you want me to be. And as I deal with my money, I'm a slave to you to do it your way. Lord, as I deal with my house, I will do that your way. Lord, as I deal with my job, retirement, whatever it is, I want to be your slave. And I want to go and be and do however you want to do it in my life. So let me ask you, how will that play out tomorrow? Today you're sitting there nodding your head, those of you that are awake. Well, some of you that are asleep, you're nodding your head too, but that's different. Okay? But so how's that going to play out? How will tomorrow be any different than today or last week? If God is in charge of your life, how will tomorrow be different? And only you can answer that question. But I hope that each one of us will say, yeah, I'm a slave. Not a slave to my job. Not a slave to money. Not a slave to my car. Not a slave to food. Not a slave to pleasure. Not a slave to whatever. My cell phone. If God said, lay down your cell phone, would you go, you know what? I can do that. Not a problem. If he says, you're going to give away all your money, would it be difficult? Oh, yeah. But hopefully we'd say, Lord, knowing this was really from you, I could do that. Quit my job, whatever it is that owns you. Back to where we started. Promising them freedom. How free are you? Really? free are you? Promising them freedom while they themselves are slaves of what is corruption, what will fall apart. Okay, that's what corruption is. It means it will fall apart. For by what a man is overcome, what drives that person? By this, she is enslaved. What drives you? What are you enslaved to? Let's pray. Father, it is so easy to get caught up in things. For some people, it is shopping. Can't walk into a store without walking out with something. Lord, some people, it's their cell phone. If they leave it someplace, there's a panic attack. Father, for some, it's a computer. Others, it's a job. Lord, show each one of us what drives us. What is it that we think we can't live without? That overcomes our lives. For some people, it's pride. They have to be right every time. Everything has to be done their way. Lord, for all of us, we have something that drives us. For some people, Lord, it is at the approval of somebody else. Lord, help us to set all of those things that own us in life and to set them aside and allow you to own us. That we would be driven by wanting to do what's pleasing to you. That we would be glad to lay aside whatever it is to say, Lord, you're the most important thing in my life. When your son Jesus came and died on that cross, and I experienced freedom from sin because I trusted him, Lord, help me to be your slave in a good, healthy way, that I would follow you anywhere and everywhere, realizing that you have my best interest at heart, and you want me to follow you. Lord, I ask that for every other person here, that their lives, they would be a slave to you, and that's what their answer would be, enslaved by what?